Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that demystifies business for artists. And today on the show, we have Dave M. Lukas. That's Lucas with a K. Dave is a serial entrepreneur, author, and investor. He's vice president and co-owner of Grasp Technologies, has almost 2 decades of global business development and corporate leadership experience under his belt, and he is the host of the Misfit Entrepreneur podcast. And this is another podcast for podcast segment. You've heard a couple before, and this is another one. I have been on the Misfit Entrepreneur talking about how to get your sales mind right and how to sell more and not feel gross about it. And Dave's on the show today to talk about mindset, tips, tricks, and tactics to get your mind right so you can help build your creative career. On top of all that, Dave is also the Amazon best-selling author of 10-Year Career, The Fast Track to Retiring Young, Wealthy, and Fulfilled. And one of the things I love about our conversation is we really talk about how to meld the creative and business mind. Before we get on with the show, I want to remind you there is a commercial-free version of the first year of our podcast. That's every hard lesson, ranterlude, and Kickstarter mini-season we did in our first 100 episodes. 74 total episodes, 9 hours of content, and you can get it all for just $20 by heading on over to thebusinessofart.us/volume1 today. That being said, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Dave. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
Man, I'm passionate about so many different things, but I'll tell you, really one of the things that I'm most passionate about is, and it still goes back, and it's been for a long time, is building and creating things that either didn't exist before or helping others succeed where they haven't been able to succeed before. Whether it's my own businesses, whether it's other people's business, it's that process of taking something where it didn't exist and finding it out, figuring out the way and finding and making it happen is such just a passion for me. I love it. Whether it's conceiving a book and then making it to come to fruition, or talking with somebody who's having a challenge, getting over maybe a mental hump or something like that, and working through that together with them, or working with a sales representative that works within one of my organizations to close a deal. It's that just fun part of making it happen, and and sometimes that boiler room feeling, if you will, to provide that success or feel that success and that sort of thing. So that continues to be a huge passion for me. And then aside from that, very passionate about my podcast, The Misfit Entrepreneur. It was actually created because of my daughter that we adopted from China a few years ago. She was the inspiration from it. So if I didn't have any audience, I'd still be doing it because it was originally created for her, and it felt too selfish not to share it with the world, right? So those are the things that I'm really passionate about right now.
Yeah, so you guys have heard before in the pre-roll, but me and Dave are doing a swap. So this is a podcast for podcasts. I was just on Dave's show about an hour ago, and now we're doing my half of it. And I love podcasts. I was talking with a friend of mine who's trying to figure out how to grow their own business. And I said, if I could do nothing else, if I could take it out and I could either do the podcast or release a book or do just one thing to grow my audience and just overall have fun this year, it would be the podcast, bar none. Do you have the same feelings, or what are your feelings about it?
No, absolutely. That's how I got to a podcast. So I'll give you a little background on it because it's a good story and it kind of leads into some of the other topics we may talk about. So I was, I don't know if you have children or not, but if for those listening that have children, it's kind of the same thing. Whether you adopt or you have a baby through natural childbirth and that sort of thing, at some point you realize, oh my God, I'm a parent now. And for my wife and I, we went through the whole process, took a couple years to adopt, and we go over to China. And, it's interesting is, and I understand why they do this now, but it seemed kind of weird at the time. It's a very clean break. They walk out, they hand you the kid, they walk away. And that's it. right? And so here we are, my wife and I, 18-month-old kid. We get her back to our hotel. She's wearing the same 3 pants that she's worn for 18 months. She's got all 3 pairs on, 3 shirts that she had in the orphanage there. She looks at us. We look at her. We look at each other. And it's almost like, what the heck do we do now? We're parents now, right? And like anybody, you start to figure it out. And the thing is that as we started to bond and grow together, and remember, she didn't even understand English or anything, right? So we had to go through kind of that finding that way to communicate and work together and figuring out each other in a sense. And so as we did that, getting in 3-6 months, she's blossoming, right? She's catching on to everything and all that stuff. And I'm finding myself starting to even teach her at this young age. And we're all conditioned, right? In some way or another, and we'll probably talk about some of that today. But, for those that you realize that, you're like, wow, I have such an impact on this child, not only now, but for their lives in the future. And so I want to be saying the right things. I want to be telling them the right things. I want to be showing them the right things. And I'd find myself, an instance would happen and it would be a teachable moment. And I would, have a thought come up that I even forgot about. Like, I've been fortunate to study with the likes of like Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, God rest his soul, and Tony Robbins and others. I went on a 5-year journey learning from these guys and working with them. And there's things I forgot that I'm teaching this kid. And I'm going, geez, if I'm forgetting and just realizing this now, how much other great things have I forgot that I may not teach her throughout life? And so that's how the podcast came about, was I got to find a way to, even after I'm dead and gone, immortalize some of these great lessons from Hannah's my daughter, from Hannah's daddy and his misfit friends. And that's how we came up with the Misfit Entrepreneur. And the reason we chose the podcast as a medium is I looked at, hey, a blog, it's one-dimensional. You're writing, you have to read it, right? Video blog, same thing. You kind of have to watch it and that sort of thing. But podcasts are universal. You can take them in the car. You got Stitcher in the car now. You've got, all the different mediums to do that, whether it's your phone or even through your radio. You can take it with you to the gym. You can, feel that emotion just like I'm talking about now. You can tell I'm passionate about this. And so it just seemed like the best medium to convey the message and everything. And I think it is in today's age.
Yeah, what I always think about podcasts, I think that the best thing about them is they are with you when you have a good time. So when you're out and you're enjoying life, you can listen to a podcast or when it sparks something inside of you, you can like listen to the podcast and associate it with a good time. But when you're having a bad time, when you're working or when you're trying to run that last mile, you can associate the podcast with something that is preventing you from or what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of distract you from this bad thing. So either way, you have this positive association with the person that's in your ear up to an hour a week.
Absolutely. And it's almost, it can be an outlet. It can be therapy, right? It can be motivational. And the cool thing is there's a episode or a focused podcast on every one of these things, right? So, like you, I've got a lot of podcasts loaded up in my iPhone and stuff that I take with me and, subscribe to, and they have different, focuses and stuff. And so depending on what I am needing at that moment or the type of information or content I'm looking for or inspiration, I'll pick which one to listen to. And that's kind of the nice thing about it.
Yeah, it's like living with the greatest experts in your field, in any field, in your ear at any one time.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it, or a great way to classify it.
Yeah, but with even more so, as far as like growing an audience, I believe that you have to pick at the beginning like either a blog, a podcast, or a vlog in order to really start your audience growth experience. And can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe I know you talked a little bit about why you chose the podcast, but can you talk a little bit about the impact that a podcast has and why you chose it over the other 3, just in a little bit more detail?
Sure. It kind of goes to from that, that story and why I chose it as to why podcasts are so good at being able to grow an audience. Again, you get to, you get to listen to, because we learn three ways, right? Audio or auditory, kinesthetic, seeing and doing, or reading, right? And when you look at those ways of learning, reading is the lower hit count of the other two. And so listening is a great way, but again, feeling that emotion, really understanding the concepts and getting them from the horse's mouth, if you will, is a really critical thing, because you can take a book and interpret it a different way than what the author thought, or what the author originally meant. When you hear it from them, it's a lot different. So it connects a lot more. It's more transportable across a lot of different mediums. Again, reading something's one-dimensional. Even watching something is kind of one-dimensional. You can't watch something while you're driving your car, but you can listen, right? And so it allows you to spread yourself across, all these different mediums in a lot easier way, so more people can find it and more people can listen to it. And I think at the same time, we kind of live in that age where, and it may not always be like this, or some other medium will come on, but right now podcasts are, one of the most used things out there and one of the most popular ways to get your content and stuff. So, if you are trying to grow a brand and you don't have a podcast putting your message out so that people can hear it, listen to it, understand it from your point of view, I think you're really missing out on a great way to do that.
I totally agree. But again, me and you are a little bit biased. I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier. And let
me stop you there, though, being biased. So our podcast launched in September. Okay? So I had never done a podcast before. I'd been on a lot of podcasts. I'd been on radio. I'd been on TV and a bunch of other things. But, I started from scratch like anybody else. I went and built my website. I, went and found the name. I figured out how to use different, the different mediums like Libsyn and SoundCloud and all these things to be able to do that. And, yes, I'm very passionate about building things. So for me, it was really exciting. Like, how do we, create this and fit it into here? And, we need a plugin that's going to help with this and, be able to grow audience so that they can give us their email address and give them things in return and figure all that stuff out. But in all honesty, we launched in September. I'm new to the game. So, where, I anticipated that it might be a great way to grow an audience. Like I said, I do it regardless because I'm really doing it. I have a bigger why. But I can tell you now that just in the short, we're recording this at the end of the year, just in the short 3 or 4 months that I've done this, my audience for this and my other businesses has grown tremendously. And the only thing I can attribute it to is the focus on the podcast and getting that out there. I've met people that, I never would have known or never even, thought about, and met so many other successful people doing so many amazing things because of this. And then in turn, they've learned about me and they've shared it with others and everything else. So I can actually say that even not being biased, that it physically proof works. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, you touched on something that I want to bring up, because you said that the podcast helped you grow your other businesses as well. And I think that's something that most people don't think about when they're growing a podcast, or how a podcast can help them, or a blog or a video or whatever sort of medium you're using to build your audience. For me, I have the business of art. It doesn't have a huge audience, but the audience that it has is the right one to help me grow Wannabe Press and the other things that I'm doing while I'm growing that business of art podcast. I talk to people all of the time that listen to the business of art and then come to my table or buy our books in some other way because of that one thing. And it introduces me to other creatives who might want to publish their books with us or work with us in some other way.
Now, the key to that too, and why that happens for you, and it's something that's innate in people, and some people have to really work to do it, though, is that it can't be about you. You've gotta think about that person on the other end listening, about what you're giving them, about making sure that you're bringing value to them and showing them, hey, look, this is why this is important for you. This is what you can get from it. And, it's got to be about that, right? And so if it's just, hey, I'm awesome, listen to me because I'm awesome, that's not going to do it for you. If those of you that are thinking out there about doing a podcast, and you should, think in terms, though, of the listener and the people in the audience and the value that you can bring to the world. If it's about just, honestly, if it's about money from the start because you think you can sell advertising, honestly, that's not a good place to come from, and you won't get an audience, and you won't sell any advertising. And most podcasts, a lot of them, never get to where they can sell advertising, and so it can't be in a way or come about in a way like that. It can't come from being about you. It needs to come from being about bringing that value and that letting you share with the world this amazing knowledge, the things you've learned, your experience and stuff, so that it can help others grow. And if you don't come at it from that way, it's not going to help you anywhere.
Absolutely. A lot of people ask me about podcasts or how to build a podcast. And I say the equipment's easy, like buy a Yeti microphone and like get an account on some thing so you can host it and then go build like anybody can do that part. That part costs very little. The important part of the podcast or whatever your audience building strategy is that you have to figure out the format and the person you're trying to talk to. If you don't have that part, and if you don't know, like you had said, if you don't know your why behind the podcast or whatever your audience building strategy is, you are not going to be successful, because that's the podcasts that go all over the place or become about you or don't have a strong voice. You have to find that market and who you're trying to speak to, not just in your podcast, but also in your company. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, the thing with that is, your why can't be about you. So, make sure you have, you really put some time and effort as to the why that you do anything, because there's a lot of time spent in producing a podcast. But the other side of it is, really making sure that you are yourself, and you don't pretend to be somebody you're not either. It'll show through very, very quickly. And, it's another way to lose an audience or not get one in the first place. So, be yourself, but don't make it about you. So that's a critical thing that I can say from a podcast standpoint. What was the second part of that question you asked? I was thinking about the first part when you asked it.
It's all right. I have a better question. I want to go back to the beginning of the very beginning when you talked about your what you're passionate about, which was, you said something that most creatives or most even business people don't think about. Most people divorce the creativity from the business. And I asked you what you were passionate about, you said the creativity and developing sort of business solutions or finding answers to problems. And I think that's such a powerful thing to think about, especially with this audience that's listening to this right now, is those two parts of your brain, the business and creative. For successful entrepreneurs, they're almost sort of like mashed together in one piece. Would you say that that's one of the things that has brought you such success in your career?
Absolutely. And you balance it. I actually can give you a great story of a product of $1 million business that was created out of thin air because of asking how. Okay. So one of my other companies is a technology firm, and we've been on the Inc. 5000 the last couple of years running. And we're a very specific niche. We're a business intelligence and data company in the travel sector. It's called Grasp Technologies. And one of the things we've been doing it for a long time. My business partner started 20 years ago. We have a great footprint. We have an amazing client base. We do business in 100 countries. But a few years ago, clients started coming to us asking us about a very specific type of product called single-use cards. Think Apple Pay on your phone, virtual payments, right? And when we started to look at it and started to look at that type of product, some of it was kind of in our wheelhouse and what we do every day. But one of the main pieces to make these things go and be able to use a virtual payment in the mediums that people use in the travel sector was not there. We didn't have it, and it would take years to build it and all that sort of thing. So we sat back and we said, well, shoot, we don't know if we can really do this. We'd love to provide this product, because we had clients clamoring for it. Anytime you have clients, a number of them coming to you clamoring for something, it tells you that there's a problem with what's out there, there's a need, and it's a great situation to be in because you want to fulfill that. So we had to sit there and we had to go, well, shoot, how can we do this? And that's a really important concept. A lot of people, when they hit a roadblock or they reach a point where they don't have a path forward, will say, oh, I can't do it, or it's not going to be able to happen. And they stop, and it stops their brain right there from that creativity side of figuring it out. When you ask, well, how can I do this? How could I make the best of this? How could I make this happen? Then your brain starts that creativity side. It starts that side of thinking and finding ways to do stuff. So what we did is we looked at it and said, okay, we can cover this side of it and this piece of it, but we had a partner that we had worked with for years that actually worked in the other side of the business that we needed to be in. So we approached them and we said, hey, look, we got this idea. We got an idea how to make a better mousetrap in the marketplace. What are your thoughts on joining together and joining forces and creating this product? And they'd never done that before. And so I said, take a few weeks, take some time, think about it, put together a workflow. If you're really interested, come back to us, right? So they did that. They put together their workflow. They came back a few weeks later. And honestly, even this launched, be almost a year and a half ago. And the workflow hasn't really changed. They nailed it from the beginning. And so we partnered up. We figured it out. We figured out how to integrate these things. We had to look at, contracts of how we do stuff to make sure everything worked properly. And then we went to market. And we ran into another issue, right? The market had some competition in it. It had some pretty established, partners in it. We said, well, how are we going to go to market? How are we going to go to market and really make a splash with this thing, right? Now, remember, at this point, I don't have a product. I don't own the technology on the other side of this that's really making it go. All I have is putting together a framework and a partnership to make all this happen and making sure the legal contracts are in place so that everybody wins, right? When you have a deal that everybody wins, it's always a good thing. And I've always said, if you are in negotiations, if you'll turn around and take the other side of the table and say yes to what you say, and they'll say yes to what, you're offering, then you're in a good spot. So we figured that out, and then we had to come up with this equation of business model. So from there, we basically went out and had this crazy idea. How do we make this solution free? Talk about the ultimate adoption strategy. Look, go ahead and try it. It's free to you. If you don't like it, hey, that's all right. It didn't cost you anything. So, and then you got to figure out how to get paid doing that, right? So in the credit card markets, there's interchange, and inside interchange is what if you've ever taken a credit card before and have to pay that money to the bank, that 2.9% or whatever that is that you pay or whatever your rate is, that's interchange. And so we had to go through 10 different banking partners to find one that would work with us and had enough and was willing to make enough sacrifice because they believed in what we were doing in our model to figure out and be able to pay us out of interchange so that we could give the solution to clients for free. And so think about this evolution, it's just asking how, hitting having some failures, having some roadblocks, you're getting some no's, but people would say, hey, a bank would say, we love the idea. We just can't make it happen. All right, we'll go to the next one and so on. And so we did this, and eventually we found the bank, we tied everything together, we launched the product to a market, and this year in 2017, it's poised to do over $1 million in revenue, and we did not own anything but the idea from the beginning.
That's an incredibly creative solution to a very business problem, and I think that I hope the creatives didn't turn off when you were talking about this particular solution, because it can be the same for a book or an art print or a show or literally anything or literally anything that you're trying to do in the creative space or any business space. And I mean, that's really the focus of this. Is the original tagline was demystifying a business for creatives and creativity for business. But really, I find a huge amount of creativity in opening and having a car dealership or a mechanic or a plumber. All of these people are use creative problem solving to solve problems in everyday life. It just might not look like a book or a art print or something that we would historically classify as creativity.
And I know that was a little bit long-winded, and I tried to sandwich a year and a half worth of work into 5 minutes to tell you that. But I think the point to take from it, though, is that it all started with the creativity. It all started with that asking how and putting a vision in place. And it's the same thing when you create a piece of art. Right? You have a vision for your book or a painting or whatever it is that you're working on, a piece of music, right? You think about the passion you have for that once you have that vision, the hours upon hours that you work, and they just fly by. It's amazing where the time goes because you're immersed in it, right? And it was the same thing, in doing this. It was just, on a very specific business niche problem in a technology sector. But the principles are the same. It's that vision, it's that passion, it's that immersion in it, it's that pushing the boundaries, it's never giving up, it's asking how, it's finding a way, it's making it happen. It's when you hit a roadblock, looking for the other way to go so you can get around it and make it still come true. And I think that relates to everything.
It does. I mean, when you're looking, I made a lot of books and graphic novels in my day, and there's always a roadblock. Whether it comes to you need it to print for a less price, or you need to sell it for more, or you need to find another artist, or you need to figure out a way to get your books into Barnes & Noble, or you need to get into this show that is curated. No matter what you're doing, there is a business there's a business aspect to all of this stuff. And just like you said, like, you're going to hit that roadblock, and it's how you get past that roadblock that's really going to determine your success. Which is a great segue into what I want to talk to you about next, which is how do you get your mindset right to do all of this stuff and to get this product to market and to get punched in the nose for a year and a half until you finally succeed?
So this is one of my favorite topics, and I'm going to start from the beginning and take you through it to how you get to where you can really use the power of your mind to overcome really anything. Okay? So sometimes this is hard to hear for people, but if you think logically and not emotionally, we're going to talk about that, it's going to make a lot of sense. We're all conditioned to be who we are in some form or another. You don't come out of the womb and they say, well, beautiful baby, too bad they'll never make more than $35,000 a year, right? Everybody's got a clean slate. And so what happens is in our lives, we're conditioned to become who we are. So parents, friends, media, culture, religion, teachers, acquaintances, everything leaves an impact on us. And a lot of that stuff is amazingly good stuff, right? Think about the traditions we have in our families and all the different things that we do. A lot of that stuff is great stuff. But there are some things that we pick up along the way that can be debilitating to our success. And the ability to understand that and the ability to catch those things and either change them or get rid of them in our lives is the absolute key to the most successful people you see in your life. Whether they realize they do it or not, whether they're conscious to it or not, they actually either naturally do it or they've learned to do what I'm about to share with you. And so if we're conditioned to be this way, the question is, how does that happen, right? Why don't we know that we're conditioned to be a certain way? And if you think about it, think about mannerisms that you have. Do you say things your parents said? We'll get into beliefs here in a second. But, there's all these things that we just do out of almost a reaction naturally and how we respond to things that we don't even think about. And that's because we have two minds. We have our subconscious mind and we have our conscious mind. The subconscious mind is really part of the brain that runs you without you even knowing it. Think about it. How often do you think to brush your teeth, drive a car, throw a ball, that sort of thing? You don't think about it at all because you've been conditioned to do it. It's a natural, automatic thing for you. Then we have our conscious mind, right? And our conscious mind is the mind that we think with. It's the mind that, I'm thinking about what to say right now. I'm processing that stuff, all that sort of thing. That's your conscious mind, right? What people don't realize is that the subconscious is the most powerful part of your brain. It's been running you without you even realizing it for many, many, many years. And the subconscious will continue to do that as long as you let it. And so that's where you have to learn and understand that there's been a lot of great things put into your subconscious, but there's also a lot of things that have been put in there that if you were asked it on your conscious side, would actually say, you know what, I don't actually believe that, right? And, you just don't think, or you automatically react, or you react in situations in a certain way because of that. So once people understand that, right, awareness is always the catalyst to change. They say, okay, I get it. My subconscious has been programmed with some things that I may not want to have in my life. The question is always, well, then how do I change that? How do I change my path? How do I change these reactions? Because we all have reactions to different types of scenarios in our life. And I will use money because money is one of the areas we have the most emotional reactions to. So if you listen to this and you don't have any money, or you're challenged with getting money, or you get money and then all of a sudden you seem to lose money and you're always broke, or you're just always making ends meet, I would venture to say that there is conditioning in your life that has caused you to be in that state. Now, again, nobody did this to you in a bad way. Nobody was thinking, I'm going to get that person or I'm going to ruin their life or anything like that. It's just natural. If you think about your parents and how you grew up, did they have challenges with money? Did they fight about money? Was there pain in your life because of money issues, right? That a lot of times can cause, you to have that same problems in the future because you shy away from money. You shy away from embracing, that area of life because you don't want that pain that maybe you had watching your parents fight about it when they were a kid or, growing up, not being able to make ends meet. So you kind of fall into a trap like that. So the thing that you have to do is say to yourself, well, what are things that I do, that I say, that I, that I typically respond with in this area, and how do I change them? And so that's where it starts. That's awareness is the catalyst to change. From there's a couple things that I recommend that people do. This is a lifelong process, by the way. I still struggle with it. I have conditioning from my past that I've got to catch and I've got to stop. Natural reactions to things. Nobody's perfect and you're never going to be perfect. So it's not like one of those things where you say to yourself, hey, this is a bad thought. I'm never going to have it again. Because, that just doesn't work like that, right? And the thing is that you have to say to yourself, okay, I reacted this way. It wasn't the way I should react. I don't believe in that. And I'm going to move on to the next one. I call that your inner coach and developing your inner coach. It's that little voice inside your head that, speaks to you in that moment or, after the fact and says, ooh, that's probably not the way I should have reacted. Or I don't actually believe that. So it takes time to develop the inner coach, but you can get that inner coach to the point where it works in the moment for you when you're about to react in a way and it stops you and says, wait a second, I'm going to ask how instead of saying this can't be done or something like that, right? And then helps you, move to where you can get things accomplished and that sort of thing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure you put things in your life to remind yourself of who you need to be and what you want to be. Take some time to write down what you truly believe because, and remember this is a critical aspect of anything in your life. Your beliefs lead to your feelings, your beliefs lead to your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions ultimately lead to your results. If I take out all the middle and just keep the first word and the last word, your beliefs lead to your results. So that's why developing that inner coach is so important. You have to become who you want to be on the inside, and you believe it about yourself before it's going to manifest on the outside. And then another way to do it, like I said, is to put some things in your life to remind yourself. So here's an example that I use. I've been doing it almost a decade. I have a board in my office, a whiteboard that says, what type of attitude am I going to have today? And it has great, fair, and poor on it. And every day when I walk in my office, I have to circle great, fair, or poor. So I have to walk up to this board, and I have to, as rudimentary as this sounds, I have to circle one of those things. And I can tell you, since I've been doing it, never once have I circled fair or poor. And it sits right across from my desk, and I'm looking at it right now as I record this. And so when a situation happens, maybe we don't get a deal or maybe we get a roadblock or a setback or something, and I start to have that reaction of, either getting angry or, feeling, bad or, those hairs on your neck standing up type emotions, I look up and I see that I've chosen to have a great attitude today. And that reminds me and snaps me back right then and there to say, wait a second, I chose to have a great attitude and I'm going to do that. We're going to find a way around this. Hey, there's plenty of other sales out there. Let's focus on these ones that we can get closed and let's move on. Hey, a guest canceled on me and it was a huge guest. Somebody's got 1 million followers on Twitter that I would love to have and they just canceled. You know what? We'll find another one or we'll make sure we reschedule, that sort of thing, right? So these things happen and you've got to have these things in your life to remind you.
Yeah, I love all of that. But I especially love the last point because making the conscious action means that you can go back and look at that conscious action that you made. And no matter what the subconscious is saying to you, that conscious action says, I'm going forward.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, a great example to crystallize how your subconscious works and how what you believe or what you bring into your life really manifests. Russell, have you ever wanted to go buy a car before? Have you ever found a car that you really like?
Wanted to or had to?
Or either, have you ever just seen a car and been like, man, I really like that car. That's going to be my next car. Or maybe it's on my bucket list for once I hit a certain goal or something.
Let's say yes.
Okay. So have you ever noticed, if anybody's listening to this, and it doesn't have to be a car, it could be anything that you want. Have you ever noticed that once you do say, man, I want that cherry red, Ferrari, let's just use that because everybody, can see a Ferrari in their mind, I guess. Once you say that, do you ever notice that you start seeing them everywhere on the road?
Yeah,
like
I
all
remember
of a sudden it's everywhere?
Yeah, I remember when I bought my car, and it wasn't a car that I loved, but I was like, oh, I'm going to buy this car, and then I literally saw it in that color everywhere I went for like the first 6 months I had it.
So that's an example of, hey, you consciously said, hey, I'm going to buy this car, right? And then your subconscious taking over and starting to point that out to you, because the subconscious itself, for as much credit as we give it, is not that smart. It's the rudimentary, like animal part of the brain, right? And so it's going to drive you in a direction no matter what. It's just whether you choose the direction or it chooses the direction for you. So, using that example and saying, hey, look, when I want a cherry red Ferrari, right? It's amazing. I live in Columbus, Ohio. Okay. It's not really the, capital of cherry red Ferraris, right? But I saw a cherry red Ferrari one day on the road and I said, you know what? I'm putting that on my bucket list. I'm putting that on my goal list. It's going on my board because, whether I get it or not, I want to get to a point where I can just write a check for that. That was a goal, right? And all of a sudden I saw like 4 cherry red Ferraris driving around Columbus, Ohio in 1 week. Okay. And it really does work. So it's the same type of thing with anything you want in your life. If there's something you're going after or your first sale or anything like that, once you consciously decide on it, your subconscious is going to drive you towards it. And the next piece of that to help you is putting those aids into your life, whether it's an attitude board or goal board like I have. Goals are really important. I'm a big advocate of writing down your goals. Goals are like beacons for your subconscious to drive you towards, right? So once you put it out there, you can see it. You can see yourself getting to it and attaining it. And so I think it's an important driver for that animal part of our brain. I think it's naturally wired to help us go after our goals. Even Aristotle realized that and wrote a lot about that.
And you can reverse engineer it. If you have a goal, you can reverse engineer how to get there. If you're just blindly searching for something, you can't reverse engineer how to get to the thing.
Absolutely. And another thing that helps you do that is, I don't know if you practice this or, for those listening, but if you've never actually done the exercise, do this for a week. Plan your day. Spend 15 minutes when you get up, write down the things that you have to do, starting with your most important thing first for that day, and then cross them off as you go. You'll find a couple things. A, you'll be twice as productive, if not 10 times more productive than you are now. You'll get a lot more done. You'll notice that your attitude changes because you're getting things done, because you're getting some of that natural gratification that you get by crossing those things off your list. And I think you'll also find that a lot of times you'll be done with everything by like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and you'll be saying to myself, well, I've accomplished everything. You could write another list and go from there, or you could use that for, some of your time that you're passionate about for other endeavors that you have, or maybe, creating something else that you want to do. If you've never done that exercise and you don't do that, I'm telling you, it's one of the secrets of everybody who's really successful. Tony Robbins, all these guys, they plan their month, their week, their day down to exactly what they're doing. It is a critical exercise, and it goes with that mind because it helps tell your subconscious what to focus on and do. If you don't do that, you have that kind of aimless day. You wake up, what do I do? Well, you kind of wander through things and, maybe you get something accomplished, or you have one of those days where you felt like you did a lot, but nothing really got done. And that's because you're kind of wandering with your mind and you're not giving anything to focus on.
My wife hates when I talked about her on this podcast, but I'm going to do it because this is perfectly illustrated by my wife's weekends. So my wife used to get up whenever she got up, and she had a list of things to accomplish in some sort of order. and she would run around frantically, hoping that they would all get done and checking them off. And then she started to block out the time. So she would actually go into her calendar and block off the time that she had to do each thing. And she ended up being able to accomplish things faster, in a more relaxed pace. And like, it completely changed how much she enjoyed her weekends.
Yeah. Guys, remember, you're not going to believe when I say this, but if you try this exercise, structure equals freedom. The more structure you're able to put into how you work and get things done, the more freedom you'll have in your life, the more productive you'll be, and the better systems you'll create to handle things, right? And automatically be doing things for you so that you don't have to sit there and, do all of them yourself, because you'll find ways to automate things in your life to make it easier. And it really is true. Craig Ballantyne, who owns Early to Rise, and is known as one of the top minds in content online and some other thing, has a great program called The Perfect Day that really goes in depth on this. If you're looking for something like that, but I'll tell you, if you just try it for a week and see the difference it makes in your life, because it truly is. It's something that if I had to pick two things that I could do, it would be, and that's all I could do to improve myself, that would be one of them.
Well, I think this goes into a sort of more a systemic problem with all creatives and really all entrepreneurs overall, which is they end up struggling to scramble to work inside their business without ever understanding the things that work or don't work in it. And when you start putting those fundamental things in place, or take a second to figure out like where I should be spending my time or prioritizing things, you start realizing that a lot of the things you were worried about like end up only accounting for 5, 10, maybe 20% of your overall income, and they're giving you 80 to 90% of your stress. A lot of people, I know a lot of early stage entrepreneurs and freelancers, and they all complain about that they have no time. And I frankly don't have that problem.
Stop there for a second, because that goes back to that subconscious mind and conditioning, okay, and value and self-worth, right? First off, in order to be successful, you have to be deliberately successful. You have to be deliberate in how you do things, right? You have to choose it. You have to say, this is important to me, and you have to crystallize that and make it important. The second thing is that you have to believe in yourself and believe that you are worth what you want to accomplish. Again, you have to become who you want on the inside and believe it before it's going to happen on the outside. So a challenge with a lot of people, not just creatives, is, a lot of people say they want to make $1 million, but not a lot of people believe they're worth $1 million. And so it's that process of actually learning to believe and valuing yourself, your time, everything you do. Time is the one thing. It's the great equalizer. It's the one thing we all have the same amount of, right? So, why is Mother Teresa able to get so much more done, or Tony Robbins, or, even a successful business owner in your neighborhood? Well, it's because that they value themselves at a higher value, and they believe it, and they believe they're worth it. And that manifests in their life. And and at the same time, they stay successful because they deliver that value, right? Because when you believe that about yourself, you're going to do that. If you don't believe it in yourself, then you feel like a fraud. Then you feel like you're conning people and that sort of thing, because you don't think that you're worth what you're telling them you're worth. And if you have that inner struggle, it's really hard to ever get over the hump and ever to really get to the level that you aspire to or want to reach.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of this happened to me this year, where the prevailing wisdom in the creative community is that you should keep at conventions or on your online store, you should keep things that are really cheap on your table because people don't want to spend a lot on them. I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs think that, but specifically in creative artists and authors. And it's very hard to make a living if you have only $5 things available in your store. So I started working on things that were more expensive, or a way to provide a better experience and charge more for it. And so we ended up doing these hardcovers for our most popular books at $30. and cutting the cost to make them in half, and they sell just as well as the $20 or $10 books. It's just that I believe they are worth $30, and I did a lot to make sure that there was $30 of value, including putting new covers on it, making them beautiful, upgrading paper quality, all of these little things to make them feel like they are worth $30. And guess what? I don't sell many more copies of the $30 book than I did the $20 book or the $10 book, but just by valuing it at triple the price, I've been able to sell it for triple the price to the same amount of people. So revenue has tripled, even as the total units of sales has remained constant.
That's a huge thing, and that's when you start coaching businesses as to how they can, grow themselves. And these are things that you look for, right? Are you undervaluing your product? Are you undervaluing yourself? Can you produce that product, and improve the quality of it, in a way that commands a higher value, where you have some economies of scale and you have some leverage that the cost to produce it doesn't scale with the amount that you're providing from a quality standpoint. So that's a very critical thing. And for a creative, if it's, whether it's a book or, an art piece or a piece of music or whatever, there are some things that are just natural in the business world that you kind of have to follow. But that's where having that how comes in, and getting a little more creative and saying, okay, it's not just going to be the piece, but we're going to give you a one-on-one for a half an hour or something with myself on how we did this and the philosophy behind it, and that increases the value by X. It doesn't cost you any more than a half an hour of your time to share the vision behind that and how that came about with somebody, and have them sit down with you because they're really interested to hear that and they want to pay for that value. Right? So it's not just the product, it's also looking for those things, the ancillary things too, that you can do and, use to increase the value of what you do and who you are.
For sure. I mean, I like to put a value on what I'm trying to sell something for. So I need to sell a book for $30, and then kind of reverse engineering what I have to do to make that book worth $30. Or we just introduce these little
or more than $30, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, whatever. It could be $100. It could be $300, whatever the price is. For my price point, it was like a hardcover book for $30, or I wanted somebody to spend $30 at my table over the course of, whatever they're going to buy. And so I designed.
Did you find in doing that, though, that people that were buying those books thought they were a great deal for $30, like they valued them at higher than $30 in their eyes?
Of course. And when I gave that, when I was able to connect with that person, they were looking for something that was different and unique and special and an experience. And so they were willing to pay more than the average $15 to $20 for a book, because this was something that they could keep on their shelf, they could display out, they could pass on to people, they could pass it around. There's not a lot of people that do hardcover graphic novel books or hardcover books at all. And when I would talk to somebody, it would immediately stand out above almost every other person that was at the convention, because everyone else was doing kind of not shoddily made, but like the quality on all of the other books was roughly the same, and then mine was head and shoulders above the print quality of that book.
Exactly. And so you differentiated yourself with it and provided more value, and were able to get a higher price point just by making that conscious decision to be and be more valuable.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's something that I find so interesting about. That's what I find so interesting about business is there's two different aspects on how to fill your funnel or how to make more money. You can there's 4 or 5, but you can either throw a bunch more people at the top of your funnel, or you can increase the value of or you could increase how much people are buying at the bottom of your funnel. And both of those things, if you double the people at the top of your funnel, you should make double the money. But if you double the cost at the bottom of your funnel, you should also make double the money. So usually people just focus on the top of that funnel, but the bottom of the funnel is usually something that is much easier to accomplish. If you want someone to spend double at your store, you can work that out much quicker than how do I fill in double the amount of good people at the top of my funnel.
No, and it along with that comes how you brand it, the experience, and all that stuff. We live in an age of experience, right? I mean, you're in LA, right? So
I am.
Rodeo Drive, right?
Right.
You go down that street, you go into those stores, and you look at the prices of things on there. It's like Fifth Avenue in New York, right? So why do people go all the way to Tiffany's at Fifth Avenue in New York or Rodeo Drive to buy something? Because it's not just because it's the brand and the name, even though they can probably get a piece of jewelry very similar to it at a jewelry store for half the cost. They're paying for that. They're paying for the experience, the prestige, and all that. And Tiffany's is not shy about the fact of, yes, you're paying for that. That's the value we bring. We believe in it. We believe in who we are. We have we back it up with their guarantee and that type of stuff along with it. So, that's the difference between a Tiffany's and, maybe a small jeweler, right? And how they think and how they do things.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing with a widget, with a book, with any type of product, right? There is always a high echelon in everything that there is. There's even, peanut butter. There's $15 tubs of peanut butter, that you can buy for really good peanut butter, at the nutrition store at Whole Foods, right? So, versus a Jif for $3. Why? Here's why it's so much better. And they show it to you, and people want that. They look for that and they buy that. It's everything, right? So it's just what you believe you're valuable and what your worth is versus what you're not.
Absolutely. Okay, so we got to work towards wrapping up, but before we do, I want you to walk me through a scenario. What would you tell somebody who is struggling, not necessarily to start their art career or creative career, but maybe they've hit a plateau, they can't make more than $100 a page, or they're struggling to get by and they want to make that leap to the next level. Well, how would you coach them to get to that next level?
Well, the first thing we want to do is take an inventory of what they believe, right? Because if they don't believe they can get to the next level, then it's going to be really hard to do anything to really get there and sustain it, right? So we have to take that step back and really kind of go through what we talked about earlier and really uncover what's in their subconscious, what they truly believe, decide if that is something that is what we want to keep or they want to keep, and if not, what thoughts they really want to have, and then put the things in place to make sure that they can consistently feed that subconscious with it. Because then, once you've done that, once you've made that correction, you can truly start to move to the next level. And so once you've done that, once we've gone through that exercise, maybe put, whether it's an attitude board or something in place like that, that can constantly remind you, get that practice happening. Then it gets to looking at, what are their systems? What are their processes in place that they're doing to, run their business today? Are they being deliberate in their business? So that's a question for you. Ask yourself, am I being deliberate in my business? Am I approaching it when I get up in the morning? Am I looking at it like hey, look, this is my time. I'm worth this. So I'm going to approach my day. I'm going to plan it. I'm going to squeeze the maximum out of it. Maybe I've dedicated 6 hours towards working in my business today. I'm going to make sure that I am, I've got my processes down. I've got my day planned accordingly. We're going to squeeze out every maximum value we can at that time. And then I'm going to go be with my family or whatever else I have to do. So we're going to look at, that side of things. So if you haven't done that inventory for yourself, okay, look at it and say, am I being deliberate? Look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and say to yourself, kind of the 80-20 rule, right? What is actually working? What is not? And then look at some of the things that are working at the time that it takes you to do it. And then ask yourself, hey, can I outsource that to like a virtual assistant, or can I automate that in some form or fashion so that I can free up my time to be able to do the things that are most valuable to me? And put a value on yourself. What are you worth per hour or per day?
I think that's so important, because if something costs, if you book yourself out at $50 an hour, and you can get somebody to do that for $10 an hour, you've just saved $40 an hour that you can take on other projects or work on ways to improve your business and take it to the next level.
Yes, as long as you then don't use that hour to do something that's not productive, right? So if you're going to replace that hour with a more productive hour, use it on the thing that's more productive. And that may be getting more people in your funnel or something like that, right? So, you have to consciously say, not that, I saved an hour, I can go play. I've saved an hour to do much more productive, higher value work, and dedicate yourself to that, right? So that's a critical thing, because once people start to put some of this stuff in place, they find that it does free them up. It does free them from some of the shackles that they've kind of had on themselves. And they start to go, well, what do I do? What do I do now? I've got free time. I'll go surf a little bit more or whatever. And, again, if you're planning your day, you're building in your time to go surf and that sort of thing. So during that work time, make sure you're doing the most productive work that you can do. So we've tackled the mindset, we've looked at your day-to-day, your processes, then we look at how we price the product, how we go to market, how we look at your strategy. What's your social media look like? What medium is your avatar on? So by this time, if you're somewhat established or, through this process, this is where we've found your ideal customer, right? People call it the avatar or whatever, but it's really the ideal customer. Who buys from you and why do they buy from you, right? Once you know that, then you got to go to where they're at, right? Just having a Twitter account to have a Twitter account doesn't necessarily help you if your audience isn't there, right? So, whether that's maybe being focused on things, I know, Russell, you and I have talked about Facebook groups that you can be a member of, things like that, or other things, right? You want to get these different lines in the water. The more lines in the water if you're fishing, the more fish you can catch, right? So, if you're a professional, obviously, how's your LinkedIn set up? Are you putting out content? What's the process? Do you have things in place that can automate it, like a Buffer or Crowdfire, or these different solutions that are out there, Hootsuite? There's all these things that you can put in and to automate these areas of your life so you don't have to spend hours and hours on them. And so, we make sure that the funnel is going and all that. We look at the pricing of the product. We look at the value for the product. We say, hey, look, can we come out with you have a version of this product. Can we come out with maybe another tier version for a little higher end version of it, right? So we can have a higher price point, just like we talked about before. It doesn't cost you as much to go to that higher tier as as it does to if you build it from scratch, so you can leverage that and have that higher tier service. Now you have multiple things you can offer. It kind of get your mind wandering from there, right? And you figure out what works best. You test some things and then you go with it. But those are some of the processes. Start with your mind. Start with your day-to-day, your processes, your systems. Look at your funnels of how you're getting things. Make sure you're in front of the people that you really want to be in front of, and you're spending that time. You're being deliberate, and the time you're spending on those mediums to fill that funnel is really the maximum, maximizing the time that you want to be doing with them and the valuable time, for what you're worth, and go kill it. That's make it happen. That's it. Just crush it.
Awesome. Are there any resources that you recommend that people check out?
Oh boy, there's so many resources.
Maybe start with your own book.
My book is called The 10-Year Career, The Fast Track Guide to Retiring Young, Wealthy, and Fulfilled. It's the result of a 5-year journey of really studying from some of the top minds, from everybody from internet marketers and how they build businesses online, to the people like, the Tony Robbins of the world and everything. So we've got a chapter on mindset, how to plan your day correctly. We have the whole system for your goals in there and all that stuff. So if you're looking for a great starting point to give you a base, that book will give you a lot of great content. But there's so many other things. You're listening to this podcast right now, so I know self-development's important to you. Look for other podcasts that are, specific to what you want them for. So if you know that times you need motivated, all right, subscribe to a podcast that's more motivational. If you need a podcast that helps with building the inner workings of a business and the systems, right? Find one that works for that, and so on, right? So make sure you're, again, deliberate in how you do your personal growth. And then there's a million books out there that you can read. And Russell, I know you're coming out with one too that'll probably be great for, obviously, this audience. But one of the ones that I think is important to read, no matter what in your life, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's older. They have some versions that are more in today's language, but that's a very good one. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is really good. It gives you the people side of things to go with that. And then, my favorite thing is if you have a library or a bookstore nearby, let your mind wander. The way that I've read, hundreds of books over my life is I literally go to the library or the bookstore and just see what titles popped out at me. Another great one for you guys, actually, especially if you're looking to make that leap from being just an individual to business owner, is the Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. He talks about the different types of businesses and how to go from one stage to the next in it. It's a really, really easy read and everything for that too. So let your mind wander. The books will pick you. Enjoy it. Listen to podcasts, set aside time specifically for personal development, and, make sure that, you've got, that built into your life. So those are some of the resources that, would be great for you. Come listen to the Misfit Entrepreneur. We always have great people on like Russell and others that are exploring a number of range of topics that have done it in a different way or found unique ways to be successful, leverage all that type of stuff. www.misfitentrepreneur.com.
Awesome. Is there anything that you want to impart to my audience that we haven't talked about yet?
Remember that we live in a society and we live in a world of instant gratification. And there are things that are going to happen in your life that are instantly gratifying, right? There are things that you do, and some of it's luck and some of it's because of your hard work and everything, where you instantly get a huge amount of sales or something like that with what you do. But just keep in mind that it's a journey, and that if you're passionate about it, if you love it, you'll spend the rest of your life doing it, because if you love it, then it's always something you're going to be doing, right? I guarantee you, if anybody here, that really loves what they do, is passionate about it, quit it today, they'd be lost. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves. If you had all the money in the world, you'd still find something to do or find something within that passion. So just keep in mind that, if you find that passion, if you find what you really are meant to do, it's a lifetime journey. Be consistent. Think water dripping on a rock, consistent. And, just stick at it. And you'll really ultimately become successful. Use these things that we talked about today, but, perseverance is a lot of it. Remember, it's always 5% idea and 95% execution.
Awesome. All right. I really don't have to ask this last question, but I'm going to anyway, just to wrap up. Can you give us one piece of advice you haven't delivered so far, and where we can find you online so that we can say goodbye?
Absolutely. So one piece of advice I haven't delivered thus far. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of something of really good value for you. One thing you need to do is definitely make sure that whether you do it through like a Google Alerts or something like that, stay up and stay abreast of what's happening from a technological standpoint. We're entering a really interesting age. We're entering an age of, we see VR and bots and things like that and AI. The world is rapidly going to change over the next few years. The next decade is going to be amazing. I mean, we just saw Tesla coming out with, they're saying in 2018 it'll be fully driverless car. You can plug it in, go to sleep, and it'll take you to Florida, and you don't have to do anything. The technology will be that good, right? So look for ways to incorporate that and embrace that in your world, whether you're creative or not, right? You can find ways to leverage this technology and things that are happening for you. So if there's a piece of advice, especially in today's age, that you can really take aside from the other things we talked about, is make sure you are staying up with that. Make sure you're looking for ways to leverage that and stay ahead of the curve and do unique things with it, because the technology is there in so many ways now to create businesses that never existed before. And then if you want to find me, we've got LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Just search Dave Lukas. Facebook, Misfit Entrepreneur. So facebook.com/Misfit Entrepreneur. I'm pretty active on Twitter @Podcast Misfit. And then I have my personal page on Facebook as well, and it's at Dave M. Lukas. So connect with me there. Feel free to shoot me an email. Dave@misfitentrepreneur.com is a great one. And happy to always respond to any comments, questions, any of that stuff. And just wish you the best in your growth in your business. If there's anything we can do to help, please let me know.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
So that was Dave Lukas, serial entrepreneur, author, investor, and host of the Misfit Entrepreneur podcast. Head on over and check out my interview and all the other awesome interviews that he's done so far. And I hope you got a lot out of it. If you do, go find Dave online, subscribe to his podcast, say thanks. And if you love this podcast, please head on over to thebusinessofart.us/iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe today. And don't forget to pick up the commercial-free version of the first year of this show. That's 74 episodes, all of the hard lessons, ranterludes, and Kickstarter mini-seasons to help make you a success. And most importantly, no commercials. You can get that for just $20 at thebusinessofart.us/volume 1. Have a great day, wannabes and creators. I will see you next time.